in my opinion, the other final boss of this whole thing is a gentleman named Bart Ehrman.
Hello.
Bart Ehrman used to be an evangelical Christian, and he got into a debate.
He used to be a Christian?
He's now, I think, an agnostic or an atheist, agnostic atheist. And in my opinion, the person who had the best performance against him was a Catholic gentleman. Shout out to my Catholics. Catholics, y'all getting your flowers, right? Named Jimmy Akin, okay? I think Jimmy Akin had the best debate. And I saw this over a year ago. And there was just so much meat in here that I can't even get to all of it. You know what I mean? Like, there's a lot in here. But this channel called Divinity of Jesus, big shout out to them, put together something with a bit of their commentary as well. I want to give them their flowers. The thumbnail is absolutely Zach Sparazzo from 2022. It says, F out of here with those fairy tales. What did you just say? And I wanted to highlight this because Bart Ehrman is another person that I've heard Muslims quote, I've heard skeptics quote, and this conversation with Bart Ehrman on the reliability of the New Testament was amazing. So this is called The Moment Bart Ehrman Realized He Messed Up on the Gospels. And I want to make sure that we give Jimmy Akin his flowers. You know, he's not on our team. He's a Christian, but he's a Catholic. I think this might be the best performance I've seen against Bart Ehrman, in my opinion. All right, so go ahead.
I want to apologize for that because that's kind of a spoiler. I probably should have given you a spoiler warning first, but it is what we're debating tonight. And Bart has made a few specific challenges to places in the Gospels where he thinks they contain errors or at least things that are odd. And I'll be happy to talk about those later, like in our cross-examination period or in the audience question period. I discovered Bart thinks the Gospels are probably right about. So this is what we're looking at. Bart, the skeptic, agrees the Gospels are probably right about all these major claims, all these intermediate claims, and all these lesser claims. And that's quite a lot. I would say that this is enough to judge the Gospels historically reliable until we've seen enough errors to counterbalance this.
Okay, so he creates an entire website, jimmyakin.com/Bart. Pull that up real quick.
No way.
And he gives this out. And it's all the areas that Bart Ehrman agrees with Christians on the Bible, where Bart and I agree. So now go down. So this is a whole article, and he literally drops this on the debate. So this is what Bart and him agree on. Jesus existed. Jesus was a Jew. Jesus was a teacher. Jesus lived in the first century. Jesus lived in Roman Palestine. Jesus was crucified under Pontius Pilate. Okay? And then those are all his own citations. Those are Bart's citations.
Hello.
Okay? Jesus came from the northern Palestine, Nazareth. Jesus was an adult. In the ADs and 20s, Jesus was connected with John the Baptist. Jesus later became a preacher and teacher to the Jews. In rural Galilee, Jesus preached about the kingdom of God. Jesus taught parables. Jesus gathered disciples. Jesus developed a reputation of healing and exorcism. Notice developed a reputation, right? Because he doesn't believe in healing and exorcism, but he believes that he developed a reputation for it. Around 30 AD, Jesus went to Jerusalem for Passover. During the trip, he aroused opposition among local Jewish leaders. Jewish leaders in Jerusalem had him tried before Pontius Pilate. Pilate had Jesus crucified. Pilate had him crucified for calling himself the king of the Jews. And this is all from Bart's book, Did Jesus Exist? Okay? Then it goes on, Jesus was baptized at the beginning of his public ministry. Jesus was baptized by John the Baptist. John the Baptist preached an apocalyptic message, coming destruction and salvation. Jesus agreed with John's message. And it just goes on, and he's using his own quotes.
Great.
Right? So he makes this big, and I think it ultimately comes down with, and the disciples were convinced that Jesus rose from the grave.
Yeah.
Right? So when you look at this, this is like, oh man, Bart actually is doing the heavy lifting for Christian apologists in terms of all the areas he's saying the New Testament is reliable and correct in.
Yeah.
Right? And yeah, so it goes all the way down to the resurrection and all of his teachings. This is really brilliant that he put this together.
Wow.
All right.
Really cool.
So let's go back.
Well, tonight, Bart has proposed a few places in the Gospels where he thinks they contain errors. I don't think they are, and we can talk about that later. But for the sake of argument, let's give him those. I notice that they aren't major claims. He's admitted the major story is right. Instead, they're on some intermediate matters or some lesser matters. But fundamentally, this does not counterbalance this. And so I conclude, yes, the Gospels are historically reliable.
Jimmy Akin's response to Bart Ehrman's critique of the gospel.
So based on the weight, the just scales, he's saying that the Gospels are reliable because there's some intermediate claims, some minor claims that Bart is nitpicky about.
Yeah.
You know? Go ahead.
are indeed lesser matters, because they agree, both of them make the point explicitly, Jesus was born of a virgin. So wherever they may have differences, it has to be on a lesser matter, not one of the top line major claims. I also want to mention a few writing practices that ancient authors use, because if you want to read an ancient document, you need to know what the rules were, how the author worked. And so I want to mention 3 different writing practices that you'll find in ancient authors, including the authors of the Gospels. The first one is selection. And authors had to be selective because they couldn't mention everything or everyone in their writing. So for example, Mark mentions a story where Jesus healed a blind man, but if you look at Matthew's account, Matthew mentions that there were 2 blind men on this occasion. And neither one of those is a mistake. They're not contradicting each other. Mark has simply selected one of the blind men to focus his story on, and Matthew selected both of them, of different passages where people have questioned whether the Gospels are accurate. And there's something else that's important to realize about these, which is they involve approximations.
I have a massive update for you. I'm sure by this point, you've heard about the Blessed God Summit happening March 27th, 28th, 29th here in beautiful Carlsbad, California. But we've heard your requests. We've conceded to your demand. There are virtual tickets that are now available for the Blessed God Summit, so you can access it from anywhere in the world, as well as access to the replays. And for those of you guys that are looking for something extra, we're also offering a virtual ticket and an exclusive Bless God Summit merch bundle. There's some amazing art and some exclusive pieces done by our friend Josh Nadeau from Sword and Pencil that you have to check out. So join us online for the virtual event and experience some sessions from my favorite podcasters, pastors, and performers. We have a stacked lineup. I'm talking about Preston Perry, Dr. Sean McDowell, Inspiring Philosophy. What do you mean? Lila Rose, Alan Parr and his wife Jen Parr. We even have Nate Sala from Wise Disciple, Gavin Ortland, David Wood, Avery from God Logic Apologetics. And on the pastoral side, we have my friend Daniel Golding, Pastor Ed Newton from CBC in San Antonio, and my personal pastor from Rhythm Church, Pastor Jeff Moores and his wife Erin Moores. You won't want to miss out from amazing performances from America's Got Talent winner Dustin Savella, Billboard charting hip-hop artist John Keith and Miles Minnick, and as seen on Jordan Peterson's We Who Wrestle with God tour, Dirt Poor Robbins. And we're still finalizing a few more speakers. So head over to blessgod.shop, get your virtual ticket now, and you can get yourself a bundle with some of the exclusive merch as well. I'll see you over there, all right? Peace.
And it's important to recognize when an author is approximating rather than giving you the specific, precise details.
So the first part is, just because something isn't said in all the Gospels and there's 1 versus 2, doesn't mean it's contradicting. It just means that the writer is selecting certain things. Here is the approximation aspect.
Yep.
Right. So check this out. So he makes the point that ancient writers would use approximation.
Happens every day. Captain Kirk says, "When will we arrive at the planet?" Mr. Chekhov says, "In 2 hours, Captain." At which point Spock says, "Correction, Ensign, we will arrive in 1 hour, 59 minutes, and 47.5 seconds." At which point Kirk does this, because Mr. Spock has just made an error in reading Mr. Chekhov. He assumed Chekhov was being precise when really Chekhov was approximating. And notice that neither is wrong. Chekhov is not wrong in saying we're going to be there in 2 hours, and Spock is not wrong in saying we're going to be there a few seconds ahead of 2 hours.
This sounds oddly familiar. Sounds like something we just dealt with.
They're both just using different degrees or levels of approximation. Chekhov is giving us the gist, he's rounding off the time, whereas Spock is being precise. And so, here's why this is important to the Gospels. Ancient authors usually had to give the gist. They had no tape or video recorders, they usually had no transcripts, they had no clocks. So they had to give the gist of what happened because they didn't have the small details available to them. And as a result, their audiences typically expected gist accounts, just like Captain Kirk would expect Mr. Chekhov to give an approximation of when we get to the planet. So it's a mistake to do what Mr. Spock did and press the details of a gist account, because the details aren't meant to be precise. They're meant to be approximate and to convey the essence of what happened. And we all approximate. We all give the gist. Like when you tell your coworker, the boss said, "We can go home now," when really he said, "I'll see you later." We must apply the gist principle to ancient authors, including the authors of the Gospels. They are not wrong for giving a gist account with approximate details. They're simply using a different level of approximation that we might like, because we do live in a culture filled with recording devices and word-for-word transcripts.
He makes his case, and then Bart challenges him on some stuff in a minute. Okay,
don't expect more precision than the evangelists are trying to provide. The evangelists are intending to give us gist accounts, and the important thing is that the gist is accurate. Like, we're going to be at the planet in 2 hours. We've seen the Gospels are right on the gist lots. And as long as the gist is accurate, the Gospels are doing what they are intending to do, which is give us a historically reliable account of the gist or essence of Jesus' life and teachings. So judged by their own standards, yes, the Gospels are historically reliable.
That's a really strong argument.
Yeah.
So then Bart starts getting into some details, some seemingly contradictory details.
So, Jimmy, do you think there are things in the Gospels that the Gospel writers invented rather than recording things that actually happened?
I think that there are situations like when a sick person comes up to Jesus and says, please heal me, that they would reconstruct what such a person would likely have said.
Bart is, well, are there things that are being created?
Yeah.
His thing is, no, there's things that may be reconstructed from whenever they wrote them. So say 20, 30 years later, 10 years later, gospel accounts are perhaps reconstructing, but the key characters and details are the same.
Hello.
Right? And so depending on how tight and wooden of a view you hold to what inerrancy or infallibility means, perhaps if you're a fundy, KJV only fundy, you're expecting the verbatim details. And Bart's saying, no, there's room for a story to be reconstructed, or there's room for Jesus perhaps teaching the same sermon 2 different times, 2 different authors give 2 different versions of a parable, and the details are slightly different.
Historical that are in the Gospels.
I don't think there are entire stories that are, no.
What about like in Matthew's Gospel?
Now listen. So are there things that are not historical in the Gospel? Bart goes to something very specific in Matthew's Gospel.
Jesus dies, and these people come out of the tombs, and they wander around. You think that's something?
Why are all these people obsessed with this story?
That's so interesting.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah. We just hit that today with Alex O'Connor.
We just hit it okay with Alex O'Connor. Go ahead.
This Gospel where Jesus dies, and these people come out of the tombs, and they wander around. You think that's something that actually happened?
Well, the Gospels record that Jesus rose from the dead, and they record that Lazarus rose from the dead, and Jairus' daughter rose from the dead, and the widow of Nain's son rose from the dead. So I don't see why other people couldn't have risen from the dead as well.
Pause it. That sounds like my response.
That's it. You had that one in the can. I just recently watched this.
Jesus been raising people in his whole ministry. What do you?
Hello.
Why not?
Yeah.
You know? Go ahead.
It's not a stretch to believe.
So, do you think Jesus was born in Bethlehem?
Yes, I do.
How do you account for the fact that Matthew and Luke disagree about how it happened?
I'll answer, but in what respect do you have in mind?
In Luke, there's a census. They're from Nazareth. And in Luke, they have to go to Bethlehem. And while they're there to register for the census, it happens to be the time when Mary goes into labor and she gives birth. In Matthew...
Let's stop there. I'll answer that one. Then you hit me with your next one.
Well, no, this is the same question. I'm showing the contradiction between the two.
No, I meant...
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay, go ahead. Yeah.
So that's not a contradiction. That's a selection difference.
Oh, no, I haven't given the contradiction yet.
Then you have that.
Yeah. No, that's not. There's no contradiction there. That's just Luke's account, right? And they go for a census, and she gives birth there. Whereas in Matthew, they're in Bethlehem, and they flee to Egypt. But when they come back from Egypt, they want to go back to Judea, but they can't. That shows that their home is in Judea, and so they relocate to Nazareth. So in one of them, they're from Nazareth, and in the other, they're from.
So I would just
Bethlehem.
like the record to show that when it comes to the reliability of the New Testament,
Yep.
the final boss himself, Bart Ehrman, highly educated, super smart, his argument against the reliability of Scripture, so far, in a debate with Jimmy Akin, 1, these guys came out of the tomb.
Yep.
Do you think that's a historical account, or do you think that was created?
Yeah.
2, but they were from this town, and they're going to this town, and this seems like it's a contradiction. This is what the final boss pushback is against the reliability of the New Testament.
Yeah.
Now, again, as a listener, you then have to wrestle with, is that really something to be...
Yeah.
Is that really a challenge to the reliability and the trustworthiness of the New Testament?
Yeah. It's super minute, but I'm still really interested in his answer.
Oh, his answer's brilliant.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So how do you?
I think that my own view is that they had homes in more than one place, that Joseph was originally from Bethlehem, so he had property there, and he moved to Nazareth for work, and he had property there.
Historically, you think that he had 2 homes?
Yeah. At least I think he was part owner of the family estate in Bethlehem.
So you think they've got a sizable income?
Well, I think that they were economically deprived enough he had to leave Bethlehem for work.
But he's maintaining a home in both places. That's an interesting idea. I hadn't thought of that. I mean, it's a little bit, we know a lot about Judaism in the first century, and I'm trying to think if we know of anybody from the lower classes who has 2 homes in 2 different locations. I don't think I know of that as
So argument
phenomenon.
from silence.
Yeah.
So why does he? And it's like, well, he needed to go here to work, and it's possible that he co-owned 2 property. He had 2 estates.
You're saying argument from silence, meaning like
I don't know anyone in the first century of Judea who was poor that could own 2 properties. Well, that's an argument from silence. Just because you don't know anyone, that doesn't mean that what he presented wasn't a plausible conclusion.
yeah. Well, and that's the thing. It's like it's nitpicking. I'll avoid that word, nitpicking.
Oh,
It's
gosh. They're gonna hate us for that.
Yeah, it's going after minute points that could be easily solvable with like a friend's couch, or you know what I'm saying, like
Just a little imagination.
a second home, a little like oh, what do you do when you go to another town and you didn't have the money for it back in the day?
Yeah.
Just stay somewhere.
Stay somewhere, yeah.
You know a friend that's got a house.
Right.
You know what do we do
Well,
now?
I think he's saying that it seems to imply that he was from 2 different places.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
what Bart Ehrman's point was. You know,
Interesting,
Go
yeah.
ahead and let him.
Well, I'm not saying how common it was, but it seems to me that's the straightforward way to read this. And I don't suspect that Joseph had palatial estates because they were from the lower class, as you say.
So if that's-
he may have just been part owner of the family estate. in
Part owner
Bethlehem.
of the family estate. Oh, interesting. So I don't understand though. Then if he's got a home in Nazareth and a home in Bethlehem, and they're coming back from Egypt, why does it say that they can't go where they want to go to Bethlehem, that they have to go to Nazareth? And why wouldn't he just naturally go there?
Matthew explains that because he says that he didn't go to Bethlehem because Archelaus was the ruler in that part of the country, and he knew how bad Archelaus was, so they diverted to the other place that they lived, which was Nazareth.
Wow. Okay. I don't know. I mean, I guess the problem with it, is that the studies of the economy of first century Palestine show that people who are doing the kinds of work that apparently Joseph was doing, he's called a tectone, translated to carpenter. It just means somebody works with his hand. It's a very low level kind of. They didn't have much money. People lived hand to mouth, and they didn't have multiple residences. So, okay, it's an interesting idea. How about the genealogy?
Yeah, it's like. Oh, I'm gonna go debate this point. That's speculation.
Yep. And they get into the genealogy. They get into a whole lot of stuff there. Why are there conflicting genealogies? And then Bart goes, well, there's different genealogies to I think he referenced Queen Elizabeth, and there's different ways that you can connect people through genealogy.
Yeah.
You know, because the genealogies overlap.
Yep.
You know. So anyway, I thought that was a great debate. You guys should go watch the full thing. Go show Divinity of Jesus some love. I thought it was a great conversation between those two. But do you notice the same patterns?
Yeah.
You notice this, you know what I mean? And it's like, but are they reliable? And what do you do with the mystery of the resurrection? And how do you navigate that conversation? You don't really have a lot of options.
Well, and the top comment here reminds me of Alex O'Connor's point.
Okay.
If the gospel accounts match perfectly, it'd be really suspicious. It would look like someone's making up a story, perpetuating that story, making sure that everyone copies the same story.
Mm-hmm.
But if someone knows, oh, I know Ruslan from Azerbaijan. Well, it's like, oh, I know Ruslan from San Diego. Ruslan from Azerbaijan is, oh, you grew up with Ruslan. Ruslan from San Diego is, oh, I know Ruslan as a YouTuber. You know what I'm saying? So like, there's different accounts. They don't match perfectly, but they're both true.
Yeah. Or I actually know him from San Diego, but I know he's the guy from Azerbaijan. I know Ruslan from Azerbaijan.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? And it's like all three
yeah,
statements are true, and they could all be said in different ways. So anyway, I thought that was interesting. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Let me know what you guys think. Are these things, in my opinion, that are black eyes and challenging to the guy? I just don't. I at this point, I feel like I've heard the best of the best of the best.
Yeah.
I think Alex gave me everything he had. I think Bart gave Jimmy Akin everything he had. And I'm not even a little bit startled or jarred or anything. I'm just like, these are just not great. I understand how you can piece all this together and come to this like Frankenstein response philosophically to the claims of I understand how you come to those conclusions. But if you're open to the resurrection being real, I just think it's more reasonable to come to the conclusions that the New Testament is reliable and Jesus is who he says he is.
Hello.
But maybe I have the faith. Maybe because I have faith, I could see it from that perspective. But I didn't always have the faith. Like I didn't always believe that Jesus rose from the grave.
Yeah.
You know?
I think there's stuff coming out that just makes it a little bit easier. Like even Alex O'Connor in our conversation was like, I'm a default to the Shroud of Turin being fake, but I just haven't done enough research, and that is pretty interesing that they did the study and it dated back to the first century. And so there's stuff like that too.
Well, I don't know. Hold on. Let's be. I don't know if he said that verbatim. He said, "It seems like, because I just, I want to be."
He said it's I default to it being a medieval forgery. But I haven't really, it's not my area of expertise, and I haven't really done all the research in it, and I see how that could be interesting. I think that's what he said.
Yeah, something like that. Yep. Anyway, what do
He
you
said
guys
it
think?
was from the first century, 100%.
Yeah, 100%, word for word. Anyway, guys, what do y'all think about this? I'm curious to hear what you guys think. I think it's fascinating. I think it's a good conversation, and I think I'm always curious and intrigued by these conversations, though I often feel underqualified to have them. If I'm fully honest with you guys.
I totally agree with that. If you feel underqualified, imagine how I feel.
Hey, thank you so much for checking out the video. Please be sure to comment below and subscribe and all that good stuff. And check out this other video that YouTube seems to be recommending just for you. Let me know if they nailed it. All right, I'll see you over there. Peace.